You walk into a room and no one looks up, not one person for even just 1 second. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, but something in your chest tightens anyway, fast, like a switch flips somewhere behind your ribs. You assume that switch is about embarrassment, a little social discomfort, nothing serious. But the real answer is far stranger. That switch is not about embarrassment at all. It's a death alarm, and it's older than language, older than fire, older than when your species even had a word for fear. For most of human history, the single most dangerous thing that could happen to you wasn't a predator, it wasn't starvation, and it wasn't disease. It was other people deciding that you didn't belong. Here's why. A human alone on the savannah 200,000 years ago was not a survivor story. A human alone was already dead. No group meant no shared food during a bad season. No group meant no one to watch your back while you slept. No group meant no warning when something with teeth was moving through the grass behind you. So your ancestors' brains did something ruthless. They stopped treating exclusion as a social inconvenience. They started treating it as a physical injury. That's not a metaphor. That's biology. In 2003, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger ran an experiment that changed how we understand this. She put people inside an fMRI scanner and had them play a simple ball tossing game with 2 other players, a setup originally designed by psychologist Kipling Williams called Cyberball. At some point, without warning, the other 2 players stopped throwing the ball to the participant. Nothing violent happened. No one said a cruel word. They just stopped including them. And the brain lit up exactly where it lights up during physical pain. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. That's the region that fires when you burn your hand or break a bone. It doesn't distinguish cleanly between a bruise and being left out of a group chat. To your nervous system, reaction and injury are processed through overlapping alarm circuitry. The finding was so specific that researchers decided to test it a strange way. What if you treated social pain with a physical painkiller? A follow-up study run by psychologist C. Nathan DeWall alongside Eisenberger did exactly that. Participants took acetaminophen, ordinary Tylenol, every day for 3 weeks. Compared to a placebo group, they reported measurably less hurt feelings from everyday social friction. Their brain scans showed reduced activity in that same pain region when they experienced social rejection in the lab. Let that sit for a second. A pain reliever, built for headaches, dulled the sting of being excluded. Why would evolution build 2 systems to overlap like that? Because pain works. Pain is fast, and it's impossible to ignore, and it forces immediate action. If exclusion had only felt like mild disappointment, your ancestors might have shrugged it off and wandered away from the group. The ones who felt it like physical agony fought to stay included. They apologized faster. They repaired relationships faster. They noticed the earliest signs of drifting away from the tribe long before it became irreversible. The ones who didn't feel that alarm strongly enough simply didn't pass on their genes as often. So the switch you feel in your chest when a room ignores you isn't a flaw in your personality. It's a survival mechanism, doing exactly what it was built to do thousands of generations later, in a context it was never designed for. This is where it gets even stranger. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying primate group sizes and found something specific to humans. Our brains appear built to comfortably track relationships within a group of roughly 150 people. Not 1,000, not 1,000,000, about 150. That number, now known as Dunbar's number, lines up almost perfectly with the size of hunter-gatherer bands anthropologists have documented across dozens of cultures, from the Kalahari to the Arctic. It also shows up again and again in modern contexts nobody designed on purpose. Military companies, small manufacturing plants, the average number of people on a person's real Christmas card list, back when that was still a thing that people did. Which means your social alarm system was calibrated for a world where everyone meant 150 faces you'd known your entire life. Every one of them mattered. Every one of them could vouch for you, feed you, warn you, or exile you. And exile was not a slap on the wrist. In many documented hunter-gatherer and small-scale societies, banishment functioned as a de facto death sentence. And in some cultures, it was used deliberately as the harshest available punishment, worse than any execution because it stretched the suffering out. A person cast out lost access to food-sharing networks, defense, childcare, everything that kept a body alive in a hostile landscape. Anthropologists studying groups like this have noted that exile sometimes preceded death by mere weeks. There was often no dramatic final scene, just a slow subtraction of everything a person needed to stay alive until nothing was left. Compare that to a predator attack. Sudden, visible, over quickly, one way or another. Exile was worse precisely because it was slow. It gave you time to fully understand what was happening to you. Your ancestors watched this happen, not in theory, in person, to people that they knew. Every time it happened, it recalibrated the entire group's fear response a little farther. Stay close, stay useful, stay liked. The cost of failing at any of those was not embarrassment, it was everything. This fear was so central to human survival that entire civilizations built formal systems around it. In ancient Athens, citizens could vote once a year to cast a single person out of the city for 10 years. No trial, no crime required, just enough votes scratched onto broken pieces of pottery called ostraca. That word is where we get ostracism today. The Athenians understood something instinctively that Eisenberger would prove in a scanner 24 centuries later. Removal from the group wasn't a mild social penalty. It was one of the most severe punishments a person could receive, short of death itself, and sometimes it was worse than death because it left you alive long enough to feel every consequence. So the fear of exclusion was not some abstract anxiety layered on top of the real threats. Exclusion was the real threat. It was simply upstream of the ones that killed you. Now think about what that alarm system is dealing with today. A notification, a read receipt with no reply, a comment that gets no likes, a meeting where your idea gets skipped over without acknowledgement. None of these existed for 99.9% of the time that this alarm has been running. But your nervous system doesn't know that. It just knows signal detected, exclusion possible, respond immediately. That's why checking your phone can feel less like curiosity and more like compulsion. You're not weak-willed. You're running on an ancient threat detection system against a modern battlefield it was never trained for. One that fires constantly because modern life manufactures thousands of tiny, ambiguous social signals a single hunter-gatherer band would never have produced in an entire lifetime. And those platforms delivering those signals are not neutral. Every like, every follower count, every seen at 3:47 p.m. is a small, precisely engineered ping directly into a detection system built for bands of 150 people who all knew your name. Multiply that system by millions of strangers, and you get a species walking around permanently on edge without ever quite knowing why. Psychologist John Cacioppo, who spent his career studying loneliness at the University of Chicago, found something that makes this even more unsettling. Chronic loneliness doesn't just feel bad. It produces measurable inflammation in the body, disrupts sleep architecture, elevates cortisol, and is associated with a mortality risk comparable to smoking roughly 15 cigarettes a day. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General released a formal advisory declaring loneliness a public health epidemic, citing health consequences on par with obesity and substance abuse. A modern government report, backed by modern data, arriving at the same conclusion your ancestors reached without a single study. Disconnection from the group is not a mood, it's a medical condition waiting to happen. Your body responds to prolonged social exclusion the way it responds to a toxin. Not because isolation is inherently poisonous, but because for almost the entire history of your species, isolation reliably predicted death. The body learned to treat the warning sign as seriously as the disaster itself, and it never got the memo that the warning sign on its own is now survivable. So when the ancient humans feared death, they weren't usually staring down a lion. They were watching their status in the group. Are people still including me? Am I still useful? Would anyone notice if I disappeared? Because in their world, those questions were the actual predictor of survival. Death rarely arrived first. Exclusion arrived first, and death followed. Sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but almost always. That fear never got switched off. It just got rerouted. It shows up when you replay an awkward conversation at 1 in the morning, editing your own sentences in your head as if the conversation is still happening. It shows up when a friend doesn't respond to a text for 3 days, and your mind quietly starts building a case for why they're upset with you, piecing together evidence out of nothing. It shows up when you feel a flicker of relief just from someone reacting to something you posted online. A stranger you will likely never meet, standing in for the tribe your brain still thinks it needs to keep track of. It even shows up in the small, automatic ways you manage a room, softening an opinion before you finish the sentence, laughing slightly too fast at a joke that wasn't funny, agreeing to plans you didn't want because the alternative, disappointing someone, registers somewhere deep in the nervous system as more dangerous than it has any right to be. None of that is your brain malfunctioning. It's also why the good version of this feeling exists too. The relief of a friend showing up when they said they would, the warmth of being remembered by someone you didn't expect to remember you, the specific comfort of a group text that includes you without you having to ask. Those moments register as more than pleasant. They register as safe. In the oldest sense of that word, the sense that once meant you would not be left to face the night alone. That is a 200,000-year-old system, doing its job with almost perfect precision in a world that stopped matching its design a long, long time ago. So the next time you walk into a room and no one looks up and something tightens in your chest for no obvious reason, that switch isn't broken, it's just older than you.